Hi, David. Thanks very much for speaking to us today. Great to have you on board.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Okay, so just want to start off really by getting you just to tell us a little bit about your playing career.
Well, I am originally from Miamisburg, Ohio. Played safety and wide receiver in high school. Went on to play safety at the University of Notre Dame, the best university in the world. I'm biased. And then was fortunate and blessed enough to be drafted in the fourth round by the Denver Broncos in 2009, where I spent 7 seasons, with my last season winning a Super Bowl, and then went to the Washington, formerly known as Redskins, in 2016 season, where then I suffered my final concussion and decided to call it quits. So I was very blessed to have such a long career, with the average being 2.5 years in the league, and being able to be dubbed as captain 1 year at Notre Dame, 3 years with the Broncos, and kind of had that leadership mentality that I kind of want to bring to the profession and to my patients as well.
Fantastic. So yeah, pretty illustrious career getting to play at the level that you had across all those different areas, and obviously winning the Super Bowl as well. That's not something many people get to say in their career. So congratulations for all of that.
Appreciate it. Thank you. 1-1.
Yep, it's a pretty good record to have. I was just thinking about during that career. Obviously, in that time there would have been a lot of travel all across the states there. So, just wondering for everybody here today, if you can just expand a little bit on what your thoughts are with regards to travel hygiene and the best way to travel, and do's and don'ts, and things that sports physiotherapists can do with athletes to try and help those big journeys easier.
I mean, I think we traveled when we weren't changing 1, 2 time zones forward. I think it was pretty good when we would leave Saturday and play Sunday. We would leave Saturday morning roughly, get there Saturday afternoon, and then we would play Sunday midday. However, there were instances early on in my career where I had a coach who, on East Coast games from Denver, us changing 2 time zones, we still would leave Saturday afternoon, get there Saturday night, and still try to play Sunday afternoon. Definitely noticed a drop in our play. Captains, guys in leadership roles early on in my career, brought that to up to him for some adjustments later on in the season. Didn't really want to respond to that, so our next coach who came over decided to actually listen and changed our whole dynamic as far as how we travel to the East Coast. And then there was also an instance when we would travel to London, and we'd play on Sunday, but we left Friday after a walkthrough, get into London Saturday morning, according to London's time, try to stay up, do a walkthrough, a little practice on Saturday, and then try to sleep, and then try to play Sunday. We were just dragging. It just did not help. It didn't work. They were trying to say, stay awake, it'll help you set your clock, get back on a actual schedule according to where you are. It didn't work. It didn't work. Everybody was exhausted. Everybody could barely keep their eyes open during meetings. It didn't work well. So that's when I first, experienced the importance of sleep, because I felt sluggish. Because I was always the guy who could stay up late and wake up early and still be able to perform. Like, that's just how my makeup was. But understanding the importance of sleep in that regard, especially having to travel across the country and into another country, it was extremely important, and definitely opened my eyes as far as how how myself needs to take sleep a lot more seriously, especially at that level. To answer your second part of your question, as far as how can PTs address with sleep hygiene and the circadian rhythm, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the coach. At the end of the day, it comes down to the head man in charge. So where we as PTs on the team, or athletic training staff on the team, would have to do is just be willing to have that open conversation with the coach. See if you can have a conversation to explain the importance of sleep and performance, explain how our body's already set up with the circadian rhythm, and how we can kind of, play along with it, and instead of butting heads up against our natural state. Now there becomes this power dynamic though, because now your head coach, if they're not willing to listen, has the power to essentially get rid of you. So now you have this head person in charge. I'm an athletic trainer, PT. He has he or future she has the final say in the matter. And if they don't like what you say, they can get rid of you. So you're kind of towing a line, but we as professionals have to take care of the patient, take care of the athlete in that regard. So I mean, that time you just have to bow your chest up and get ready to have that conversation and be ready for, being rejected or being accepted.
Really glad to hear you say that, because obviously we talk a lot about patient-centered care, and I think when it comes to the sports setting, then athlete-centered care is slightly different. So those sort of things you mentioned there about advocating for your athletes and putting your athletes' needs first, and not being afraid to take those conversations higher, I think that's really, really important, David. So yeah, thank you for that. You touched upon your concussion before, so obviously in and around that, I'm sure there was other injuries that you had as well during your career. And as sports physiotherapists, quite often we have delicate and sometimes difficult conversations with our athletes and players. Just wondering, through your experiences as a player, in terms of how information was given to you, both bad news and potentially exciting news with regards to returning to play after injuries. Have you got any recommendations around delivery of that information, and in particular the softer skills that are involved?
I think when it comes to delivering information to an athlete, I mean, you just have to shoot them straight. I think that's the best course of action. I mean, I think you're also CYAing yourself as well in that regard, just trying to give them as much information as possible in regards to their injury. Now, I think if you're an older player, you're more acceptable of that because you now have established yourself in the league. You now have got some type of grace when it comes to injury. You can possibly take a little more time. What about the guy who just made the team? Or how about the guy during training camp who's trying to make the team, who's on the edge of being that 53rd man on the active squad or getting cut? Like, how you deliver that information can play a huge role as far as their mentality in regards to going out there and performing anyway, because they're trying to make the team. Sometimes they're just not going to listen. So I kind of think of it as, I hate the 10% rule or what have you. When you're meeting with a whole group of people and at least two of them listen, you're doing your job. I shoot for that 50-60% rule with my high school athletes, because they're still going to do what they want to do, but it's me educating them as far as I've been through this experience. I've been on one side of it when I still went out there and played hurt and I could have potentially got cut because my performance is low, or I've been on the other side where, you know what, I'm gonna give myself another week just because something doesn't feel right. And I think when you talk about professional settings, you lose that patient-centered care, because now it's not about the patient, it's about the performance of the team. And if you're going to deliver some message or information to a player saying you'll never be able to play the rest of the season or your season's done or things of that nature, you have to present it in a way where you're speaking to them as a person versus as an asset to the team, as a financial asset to the team. And when I broke my leg in the Super Bowl 50 year, I think how they presented it to me was real. Like, I met with the athletic trainers, I met with the PTs, I met with the coach, I met with so everybody talked to me, but they talked to me as a person. And it was still hard to accept because it was my best season I was playing. I was going into another contract year. That was a contract year. I didn't know what was going to happen in year 8. I didn't know what their plans were or what my future plans were. I knew at that time I wanted to keep playing, but how they delivered it made me feel a little bit better about it in that regard. That just to make me feel like a person and that I was more important than just a dollar sign against the cap.
That's really good to hear. I mean, was that the positivity they used in those messages, or was that the timescales they put into it? Or I mean, what when you say about they treat you like a person, what sort of things do you mean by that?
I think what I, what I've heard in my past is like, "God, we need to cut you to create space here, or we need to, oh, you're hurt, your injury's not that bad, but we're still going to put you on IR so we can move somebody else up." You know, there's that business component of it. Now with me, where I broke my ankle, broke my leg, they were telling me, you know, 6-7 weeks to heal. At week 6.5, we were in Super Bowl if we made it there, and not knowing if you're going to make the Super Bowl or not. They took something. They took an approach as far as we're looking out for your health. We're looking out for your leg. You did just play 80 something snaps on that broken leg. Let's take into consideration like we might not even have that part of the season down the line. There's no need to keep pushing it and keep pushing you. We appreciate all you've done for the season. It's just unfortunate that you had that bad break.
Okay, that's really nice to hear they package it that way. That's really good.
Oh, I've had it packaged other ways too from another team. So it's not always like that. It's not always patient centered or player centered. It's like I said, we need to move you over because we need space for another guy.
Yeah, that's not good at all. And I suppose going into the profession that you're now in, I think that's really useful and valuable. I'm sure you can lean back on that with the difficult discussions you can have in the future with your patients and athletes as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I run into it now. It's like just trying to convince not just the high school athlete, but trying to convince the parents too. That is a whole battle in itself. You know, it's different dealing with a college athlete or a pro athlete, but when you get into high school and middle school, you know, a lot of people think their kids are the second coming or things of that nature, and there's like, no, they got to play, they got to play, they got to play. And do they though? They're in 8th grade. Like they still have 4 years of high school to, you know, make a name of themselves. Do they when they're a sophomore in high school? Like now that also becomes a tricky part of PT and that age group when you start getting high school. It's like, man, I would really feel like a jerk if I told this athlete that he or she can't play the rest of their senior year, you know, or that they'll have to sit out for, you know, 5 weeks because of a shoulder, you know. That would be hard because I mean, that's make or break in their potential future career in case they haven't established one prior to that. That you just run into that hardship, and I think that's the hardest age group of our profession when it comes to communication. You know,
I wouldn't disagree with that at all. And I think when you're talking about soft skills, you need almost two sets of soft skills there when you're speaking to both the parent and the high school or teenage athlete as well, because there's certainly different messages that they probably both want to hear. But the communication styles are probably going to be different for that as well. So like you say, it's a complex clinical area to work in, I think. So kudos to those that do.
Yeah.
For sure.
Over to you, Karen.
Okay. Something as you were speaking, I was sort of writing things down, and I think what you illustrated very well are all of the variables involved when an athlete has an injury. So when we're talking about pro sports, you've got the variables of the business of pro sport. And where does the athlete fit in this shared decision-making model? And we can contrast that to the variables of, like you said, maybe a high school athlete where you don't have as many stakeholders, but there's still variables there. So let's start with kind of the variables on the business side of pro sports when it comes to an injury and how that shared decision-making model works.
Oh, well, so there's a lot of hands in the pot when you talk about pro sports, right? You have your family, your immediate family, you have your distant family that wants to reach out and put all this pressure on you. You have the business aspect, and then the business has different layers, whether that's, you know, just trying to make the team and not be a penalty to the salary cap, um, you know, being cut because you're making too much money, or being cut because you're expendable because you're not making a lot of money. So trying to find that sweet balance there. Um, the the be to reach like the time threshold to get your annuity and your 401k and your pension, like having to get into that fourth year. Um, there's a lot of business pressure as far as, you know, some retirement stuff in that regard as well. And on top of the family, on top of yourself to be a competitor, like there's just a lot of pressure on the pro athlete to provide for not only himself but others out there. And then you have the pressure of the community too. If you don't perform well, please believe somebody's in your Twitter saying you suck. Like there's a lot of pressure, you know, in that regard. So trying to weigh all of that as a professional athlete, and having to try to have a clear head when it comes to all that just always in your face, you know, you don't go a day without it. You know, I think that's what makes it tough to perform at a high level, because you've got all those stressors, you have all those things going on. And then when you get hurt, it's like, well, it's not just me anymore. It's everybody else around me as well. You know, so that's very tough to manage, especially as a young kid, being introduced to a lot of money real fast. You know, you're 21, 22 years old, and then you just come into all this money, and then people who never went to a college football game is now reaching out, wanting to get tickets, wanting to come see you, wanting you to buy their flight. Oh, can you buy me a house? I have this business venture. Can you help support this? You know, all types of nonsense that comes with being a pro athlete. So that's where, as a therapist, you have to keep in mind of there's a lot more stressors that they're going through, that they have, than a lot of people may not think and understand. Like there's a lot of pressure that they have to be out there and play. So you got to kind of, you're weighing it. It's like, well, I want to be patient centered, and like I think they would get worse, but in the same breath, I'm being patient centered because they have to go out there and make a living. Yeah, that's kind of why I don't want to be in professional sports right there.
Yeah, man, I thank you for sharing all of that, because I think a lot of therapists who aren't in professional sports, which is the majority of physical therapists,
Mhm.
to don't really understand the amount of pressure on all those different fronts. So thank you for that. And you had just said that, you know, you're not in that space anymore. So you made the decision to step away, which, as we talked earlier, is really a unique decision, certainly in professional sports and certainly in the NFL, to step away. You made the decision to step away because of the value of your health. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I had a history of concussions. So I had one in high school, one in college that are reported and recorded, and then 6 in the league, which are reported and recorded. So there definitely could be more. Um, so it just came down to that last concussion, just having young kids at the time. It's like I just had to weigh my options. Like I've made it 8 years. The average is less than 3. Do I really need to keep playing? I ended up with convergence deficiency, a lot more headaches. You know, there was some irritability for a minute. So there was definitely some changes physiologically that I was experiencing, and just weighing in how that could adversely affect my family. So after that 2016 concussion, I decided to call it quits for not just my health, but the health of my family. I want my family to be healthy, and I want my kids to be able to see that my dad was able to step away from a game he loved and provided him so much for the safety of his mind and his family. Now, I think a lot of I think a lot of ownership has to come on the athlete when it comes to stepping away from the game, because you can only put in so many rules. You can only change so many different practice acts within the CBA. You can only change so much. I think the only thing you can do is like, okay, when he or she has concussion number 3, we have to call it quits for them, right? Like that's the only way you're going to be able to officially and effectively pull an athlete from the game without them having to make their own decision. It was tough though. I'm not going to lie. It was tough. It was a huge part of my life. It was a huge part of, what kept my grades straight in high school. It was a huge part of, my time in college. It gave me a chance to get a higher education in that regard by earning a scholarship. And then, it allowed me to be able to provide for my family. So it was tough. It was a huge game, huge part of my life. That's a lot of years, and having to step away from a game that's given me so much was extremely tough. But in the same breath, I was able to entrench myself in school right away, and that kind of helped save me and from being one of those stories where it's like, well, I don't know what to do now. What do I do? Where do I go? So yeah, I think health is extremely important, and when it comes to concussions, I I don't play around with that. That's not something that I ever want to, you know, come across as I don't care, just throw some dirt on it, walk it off, this, that, and the other. And I want to be an advocate for, you know, parents, especially in underprivileged areas that might not have access to that care to, you know, get the proper care that they need post concussion. To be told like that is a concussion, even though it's not, you know, blinding lights or whatnot, but just because they have a headache after a big hit, we have to think of it as concussion. So I'm very passionate about it. I just finished a course about it last weekend with the American Institute of Balance. So just wanting to entrench myself and learn as much about something that's plagued me throughout my career and how I can pay it forward and help out.
Amazing. Oz, I'll shoot it over to you because if you have any follow-ups on the concussion, I know this is your area of research. So this could be a nice little partnership moving forward, I think.
Yeah, I've probably got a few things I was going to ask David when the recording stops, if that's okay. I think unless there was anything else that you wanted to ask David now, Karen,
Nope.
just wanted to really sort of thank you so much, David, for giving up your time again. And just wondered if there were any things that you can look back on and reflect throughout your playing career that maybe if there's one thing that you take forward to your clinical career, that could be either a clinical nugget or it could be something in terms of athlete relationships and player interactions, or if there's one thing that you kind of think you'll lean on in your next 20 or 30 years of clinical work.
Well, I mean, I feel like everything I spoke about today, sorry, the computer got very hot on my leg. Everything I touched on today so far, it's something that I'm going to take into practice. How to communicate with the athlete, how to communicate with the parent. When I do have the older professional athletes, how I communicate with them after they have the surgery or their doctors are talking about surgery, things of that nature. I think another huge thing that I'm going to take with me from my time, and I think it's just like seeing how the training staff, the strength and conditioning staff changed throughout my time playing, where it was all about heavy lift, powerlifting, all that up front, first and foremost. And then my second strength and conditioning coach that came year 3 was more about functional movement and performing a movement assessment and things of that nature. I've definitely found some type of benefit to that as far as, and have seen actual improvement as far as a decrease in the number of injuries with hamstring pulls and ACLs and groins, things, nothing like concussions or anything, because I mean, we're just human rockets on the field at that point in time. So it's kind of kind of impossible to stop that unless you stop the game. But physically, in that sense, a true movement assessment, trying to get in with schools and just provide my services, no charge there, just wanting to help the athlete because that's what helped me. Because I was always pulling hamstrings, I was always pulling a groin. I had a lot of pulls throughout my history. I think most of my injuries in my 800-page medical history from the league is a lot of pulls. So that's another thing I would take from my time. And I think just my experience is what I'm going to take from it, honestly. That relatability goes a long way. You know, you know, I've been where you are, not about just the injury, right? Not about an ACL or anything, because I've never had an ACL, but I've been where you are. It's like, I want to be out there and play. I am frustrated that I can't be out there and play. I feel like I lost a part of me because I'm not able to be out there and play. Like, I have experienced those same type of feelings, and that's that whole biopsychosocial you know, chart that we're talking about that we learned in PT school, and that we're in a huge part. Treat the whole person, you know, treating the whole person and trying to identify, like, oh, you haven't kicked the ball in forever now. Well, you're one step closer to playing soccer again, you know, just trying to, you know, promote, you know, progress versus, you know, sitting down and just being in a funk the whole time. Because, you know, when you're stressed or you're worried or you're not, you know, you don't have a sense of yourself, that definitely can deter and slow down treatment in itself. So just trying to be relatable to them and meet the patient where they are as far as you know, how they are emotionally, because sports is, especially the higher up you get, sports emotions taken out of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's more about the business aspect. It's no longer about the purity of the game. It's numbers and business.
Okay. I think that's probably a good place to end it. Do you think, Aaron?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop the recording.